The Awakening, the Revised Edition by Lilac Moon. Chapter 2. The War Rages. Anakin wiped the sweat from his brow as he ran with stealth speed through the corridors of Grievous's ship, the Malevolence. 1 minute they had been in control of the mission, and it looked as though they would destroy Grievous. And then, the next, his wife's ship was somehow in the middle of the battle and had been captured by Grievous. Now she was somewhere on this ship, and he had to find her before Grievous did. And just the thought of finally seeing her again, even in this situation, after 6 long months of separation, made him run harder and faster. He had so much to share with her, as had so much had changed in just 6 months. Upon his return to Coruscant, the Council had surprised him by knighting him and appointing him as one of the many Jedi generals that would command the clone army during the war. But that surprise had been followed up by another surprise, as he was assigned his own Padawan during a very big mission. Her name was Ahsoka Tano, and she was every bit as stubborn, hard-headed, reckless, and eager to prove herself as he had been. But he already cared deeply for her, like a daughter, and he couldn't wait to tell Padme all about her. But first he had to make sure Grievous didn't get his filthy claws on his angel. He could feel he was getting closer to her as he reached the production chamber in the bowels of the ship. He spotted Padme on the other end of the chamber, ducking blaster fire. He leapt onto the first conveyor belt and then another, determined to get to her. Ahsoka watched the battle's progression at this situation table. Though she wasn't paying much mind to what was happening, her thoughts were more focused on her master's peculiar behavior, just before he had left to rescue Senator Amidala. His exclamation when he had discovered the danger the senator was in had been strange enough. Then she had sensed a torrent of emotion from him for a split second before he walled up his feelings and locked his mind down tight. She knew that her master was supposedly friends with Senator Amidala, but her master's behavior spoke of more. Ahsoka loved Anakin, and loved being his Padawan, despite their bickering and her frequent questioning of his orders. Whatever it was between her master and the senator, if anything at all, it was personal. Ahsoka wasn't sure if prying into her master's personal life was right, no matter what she believed might be going on between them. Padme yelped and ducked again as blaster fire sailed over her head. The battle droids were closing in, and she was cornered. "Padme! Jump! I'll catch you!" Anakin called as his feet landed firmly on the moving conveyor belt. She didn't hesitate, for she trusted him fully and leapt into the air. Anakin steadied her with the force and floated her to him. He caught her in his arms as they sailed through into a tunnel on the conveyor belt, out of Obi-Wan's sight. Padme clung to him tightly, as she felt his arms enclose around her. She breathed in his familiar masculine scent that she had longed to inhale for months. "Oh, Anakin," she whispered in relief as she was finally in her husband's strong arms again. "What you won't do to get me alone," he joked. "Stop talking," she told him. And at last he lowered his lips to hers, and he was in heaven once again, even if their kiss was brief. As they exited the tunnel, their lips parted and Obi-Wan called to them. He would deal with Grievous, and it was up to them to destroy the ship. "Come on, Angel. We need to find the bridge on this bucket of bolts," he said, and he used the force to jump them onto an alcove exit into the chamber. "I suppose you have a plan?" she replied. He smirked. "Of a sort. Come on," he told her, as he took her hand and led her into the ship's corridors. Some time later, Ahsoka watched the Malevolence crash into a nearby moon and combust completely. She wasn't worried, though, because her master had gotten himself, the Senator, and Master Kenobi off safely, aboard the Twilight. Now she waited as they disembarked. The Admiral bowed deeply to Senator Amidala. "Senator, we are all relieved you are unharmed. Captain Rex can escort you to a room we have prepared for you to rest in," the Admiral stated. "Thank you, Admiral," Padme replied graciously, as she glanced very quickly at Anakin before following Rex. "The Council will be wanting to hear from us. Let's get the debriefing underway," Obi-Wan said as they headed to the Situation Room. Ahsoka couldn't help but notice the permanent smile on her master's face. "You seem happy," she mentioned. "I just got to blow up something, Snips. You know that always makes me happy." Anakin covered, but Ahsoka somehow knew that it was more than that. Anakin slipped down the corridor toward the room where Padme awaited him. A few clone soldiers milled about, and though they would never question one of their generals, He used a small mind trick on them to make sure they didn't remember seeing him anywhere near this wing of the ship. Ahsoka was in bed and he had made sure she was asleep. Debriefing was fairly simple, and they had been ordered to return to Coruscant with the Senator, and he guessed he would probably have tonight and tomorrow night with Padme, before he, Ahsoka, and his battalion were reassigned on another mission. Debriefing had also included a thank you speech from Chancellor Palpatine as well, and Anakin was currently reflecting on his feelings towards the man he had once considered a friend. His feelings towards the Chancellor had changed in the last 6 months, and a conversation between himself and Palpatine just before he had been deployed to his first mission of the war had changed that. He didn't know why, but Palpatine had not been warm and friendly with words echoing encouragement that he usually had been. He had been very cold, like Anakin had done something wrong, though he couldn't recall ever offending the Chancellor. And it was because of that encounter that he had been able to look at the Chancellor as something other than a close friend. It was then he began to see the man that Padme had always told him he really was. A politician, with an obvious agenda. For some reason, before the war, Anakin had somehow factored into Palpatine's agenda, and for whatever reason, that was no longer the case. Because of that, he had started becoming more conscious of the Force in Palpatine's presence, and he'd begun to conclude that Padme was right about him. He was sure she would be glad to hear that. After today, he was questioning their esteemed Chancellor even more. After Padme had told him that she was sent to the very coordinates where they were engaged in battle by the Chancellor, he became very worried. Palpatine had blamed the mishap on faulty intelligence, but he wasn't convinced at all. Padme was one of his most outspoken critics, and now he feared for her life more than ever. He hadn't nor dared to suggest that the Chancellor was somehow involved in an attempt on Padme's life, because he had no proof, and making any accusations would only endanger her more. Realizing that Palpatine was just out for himself and his own cause, like so many in the Senate, and unlike his wife, had been a hard pill to swallow. But he didn't want to think about any of that right now. He was a husband that hadn't seen his beautiful wife in 6 months, and he was only seconds away from a real reunion with her. As he slipped into her quarters, he saw her silhouette by the circular window where she stood, gazing out at the stars. She still wore the brown and tan flight outfit she had come in, but she had taken her hair down and brushed her curls out. 3PO stood in the corner, his eyes dark as he had already shut down for the evening at Padme's request. Padme ran into his arms and he spun her around, before capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. As he set her on her feet and broke the kiss, he pressed his forehead against her while they breathed air into their lungs. "I've missed you so much," he rasped, as he sought out her lips again. They met in short yet passionate unions for several minutes, before she could gain the air to speak again. "Every night I long to be in your arms. The nights are so cold and lonely, and I know they're only 10,000 worse for you," she said. "They are. Some nights seem endless without you, but tonight will not be like that. And if this Force smiles on us, then we might get tomorrow night as well," Anakin replied. "Really?" she said with hope in her voice. "We are returning to Coruscant, and we will have a meeting with the Council before we are reassigned to another mission. If I'm right, then it will be the morning after tomorrow before we leave. It will be the morning before we get back," he told her. "We have all night," she said. He smiled and nodded. Padme locked her arms tightly around his neck as she trapped his lips with her own in a smouldering kiss, which he eagerly returned, and moved their lips feverishly over each other's for quite some more time. The next day. "Anakin, the Council would like to commend you and Master Kenobi on the efforts on the destruction of Grievous's ship. It was a victory that the Republic needed in order to turn this war around," Mace said. Anakin and Obi-Wan bowed curtly as they stood before them. "I only hope that brings us closer to ending this war," Anakin replied. His response surprised Obi-Wan, and intrigued Yoda. The change in Anakin since his knighthood had been astonishing. His old Padawan would have been thrilled by all the action and battle, and the Council's praise would have furthered his ego. But this Anakin was not the same. He was still by far one of the most skilled warriors in the Order, but Obi-Wan sensed that he did not thirst for battle anymore. And he was confident in his abilities, yet not as arrogant as he had once been. Yoda chalked it up to a good decision on his part to appoint a Padawan to Anakin, and Obi-Wan wanted to give Ahsoka the credit too. But in the back of his mind, he knew it was a certain other Nabooian female that was probably the reason. Anakin had been different since he returned from Naboo, and Obi-Wan had often contemplated on confronting Anakin about it. He had not missed how Anakin had been nowhere to be found on the ship last night. But since the changes in him seemed to be good, Obi-Wan had elected not to pry and would keep to that plan unless his former Padawan gave him a reason to confront him. He had no proof that there was anything going on between Anakin and Padme, and therefore he would not make waves. The council adjourned, and Anakin exited the chamber where Ahsoka was waiting. "So when do we ship out again?" she asked him. "In the morning. We'll be heading for the Outer Rim. Anxious to go already?" he asked her knowingly. "You know me, Master," she replied. He nodded. "Yes, I do. And if I am correct, you have mediating to do this evening," he said. Ahsoka groaned. "I was hoping that you had forgotten," she mumbled. "I never forget, Snips. Now get going and I'll see you in the morning," he told her. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I've a few things to take care of while we're here, and a few friends to visit," he replied vaguely. Ahsoka nodded and watched her master walk towards the landing pad. "You can trust me, Master. I hope someday you'll tell me where you're really going," Ahsoka said as she headed for the Padawan dorms. Padme's heart skipped a beat as Anakin's speeder landed outside her veranda that evening. She ran out to greet him and he hugged her tightly before kissing her passionately. "Can you stay the night?" she asked. He smiled. "I'm all yours for tonight, Angel. We don't ship out until the morning," he replied as she leapt into his arms. He smiled before pressing his lips to hers again. "Good, because I'm making us a romantic dinner," she said. "Really? I didn't know you cooked," he said. "I'll have you know that I am very capable in the kitchen. I grew up in a mountain village after all. I learned to cook long before I learned anything about politics," said Padme indignantly. "Well then, I'm sure whatever you've made will be absolutely delicious," he replied. "I hope so. I've never made bantha stew before," she replied. He looked at her in surprise. "You made bantha stew? But not even Dex has that recipe. Where did you get it?" he asked. "I sent a data letter to Beru several months ago, and she wrote back. I asked her for your mother's recipe. I told her it was for you, and she gave it to me. I know Urban was rather cold to us, but she and I actually had a lot to talk about. I guess I wanted to make it for you so that when you came home, you would think of this place as your home," she told him. He smiled and cupped her cheek in his hand. "I already do. Home is wherever you are, my angel," he replied as he kissed her tenderly. "You really are an angel," he added. "And you're my handsome Jedi protector," she replied. He smirked and pressed his forehead against hers. "Yeah, but with you, I and the title of Jedi Protector took on a whole new meaning," he said. "You're right. You became more than that. You became my handsome Jedi husband," she replied as their lips met. "So, how long until dinner is ready?" he asked. "About an hour," she replied. "A whole hour? Whatever will we do with all that time?" he asked playfully. She giggled. "Oh, I can think of a few things," she replied. He smirked. Line break. Palpatine sat deep in meditation, delving into the dark side. Skywalker had returned to Coruscant today, and he was, no doubt, with Amidala. He could feel the emotions of happiness and love swelling from his significant thought presence, and it was sickening. Just as he was about to pull himself from meditation and get away from the nauseating feelings surrounding Anakin, he suddenly felt a twinge. A peculiar new presence. As he searched it, an evil snarl marred his old, weathered face. It had happened. The conception. Skywalker's first offspring had been conceived, and so much sooner than he had expected. His plan had worked perfectly. Sending Amidala into that trap and reuniting her with Skywalker It worked out even better than he had expected. He ended his meditation and immediately opened a comm channel with Tyrannus. Return to Coruscant immediately. There's an urgent matter we must attend to, Sidious ordered. Yes, my master, Tyrannus replied. Soon everything will fall into place, and I shall rule the galaxy at last, cackled Sidious evilly. Padme lay spooned against Anakin in her bed, as they bathed in the afterglow of another bout of love. She turned in his arms, and their lips met in several passion-filled minutes. I love you so much, she whispered as their lips parted. I love you too, but I hate that I have to leave you again in the morning, he replied. But we both know that the war won't last forever, she said. Maybe not. But we've been married for 6 months, and I've only been with you a total of 3 days. It's not fair to you, Angel, he replied. I want no one else. Only you, Annie. Because you're everything to me. I'll wait forever for you if I have to, she said. It won't be forever. Once this war ends, I will never leave you again, he replied. Annie, what if the council doesn't see things your way? Suppose we do tell them about us when the war ends, and they tell you that you have to choose between being a Jedi and being married to me, she wondered. That's a no-brainer. I will always choose you above all, he replied. But you were born to be a Jedi. I don't know if I can ask you to give up something that you're so good at just to be with me, she fretted. You don't have to ask. There's no question about it. I could never give you up, and I want to build a life with you. Either the council will accept our marriage, or I will resign my position as a Jedi when the time comes. If they make me choose between being a Jedi and being with you, then I will choose you, and I will have no regrets, because you're my life, he said. She kissed him passionately, and they gazed into each other's eyes for a long moment, before she started to get up. Come on, let's clean up for dinner, she suggested. Why get dressed? He asked coyly. She smirked. We are not eating dinner naked. Now get up and get dressed, because I have worked up quite an appetite, she replied. He smirked. Come to think of it, I'm starving too, he said as he kissed her neck, and she giggled. I'm cutting off the chapter there, guys. They get a little bit too flirty there for my tastes. These crazy kids, huh? I like that chapter. That's a good chapter. Oh, Sidious, you hideous soul. And I do not regret making that pun. And Ahsoka being introduced. Oh. And I like how Obi-Wan and Yoda are noticing the differences, and especially that Obi-Wan is already suspicious of his connection with Padme, but yeah, I guess he's going to try to be a bro in this. We'll see. You guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!